Welcome back, everybody, to We Are TPM. Today, you are having to look at myself, Kyle Teixeira, sitting next to you once again, John Teixeira. This week, we are back to discuss owners accessing their rentals. Give us a call if you want to discuss this or you want to do this. Don't give us a call, but the number is 817-818-9039 or shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com, not .net, not .org.com. Let's get into it, John. What are we discussing? The owner wants access to my house.
This is kind of like answering one of those frequently asked questions on our podcast, right? So it's kind of like using our podcast to do frequently asked questions for our business.
Yeah? It is. And I guess this is more of a situation. Well, I guess what we're going to talk about is more of a situation where a property manager is involved, such as ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, if you're managing it yourself, then clearly you're going to have to access the home, right? I mean, you don't have to. I guess you can use contractors and not access it because it is best. We do. If you haven't listened to our podcast, we have a basic philosophy that's separating the relationship between an owner and a tenant is always a great idea. So if you're managing it yourself, you do that through contractors and by other means, then great. But you need to do it as often as possible.
But the property manager is the veil, right? We call it the veil.
The veil.
We are the veil between the tenant and the owner.
There you go.
We are the veil between emotion and emotional decisions.
Yes.
And relationships that cause emotional decisions. We are that veil. And what we are talking about today is essentially piercing that veil.
That's right.
So, and obviously from our initial comments before we even get into it, we are discouraging this act, right?
I love where this is going. We're piercing the veil. We're not making emotional decisions. This is great. This is going to be better than I thought it was, Kyle. Let's go.
What's wrong with emotional decisions in an investment?
Yeah, they cost you money every single time, right? Like emotional, fear-based decisions always cost you time and or money. Almost every time. Very rarely does it not cost you at least a little bit of money, depending on the particular decision.
And since we jumped into it being an emotional decision, I'll bring up the fact that 99.9% of the time, and pretty much, and I'm using that to cover my bases here, but I'd almost argue every single time we have gotten this request for an owner to come back into town and walk through the property. And this isn't additional to our walkthroughs and inspections, right? This is because they want to put their own eyes on it and blah, blah, blah. It's 99.9% an emotional decision because they only ever ask to do this on houses they previously lived in.
Pretty much. You're spot on. Or sometimes maybe their first and only rental. Even if they hadn't lived in it and they just bought a rental and it's still kind of a baby business, you know what I mean?
So sometimes they flip themselves with their own sweat equity, that kind of stuff, because there's an emotional tie to the house is the reason they want to do it. And that is one of our biggest reasons that it becomes an issue, right? Well, maybe not our biggest reason. Our biggest reason is
keeping that relationship separate that we talked about, not piercing that veil, is really the biggest reason. So here's what I do. Here's how I handle this with owners that want to go do work, because that's another common reason. Owners want to do repairs. They want to do their own repairs. They're do-it-yourselfer minded, and that doesn't go away when they end up with a rental for some reason. So instead of paying some contractor $400 to do something I can do by going to Home Depot and buying $50 worth of material for, I'm going to go do it myself. And so it's not understanding the time value of money, right? A little bit, but that's what they insist on doing.
Yeah, but I mean, and not that we're sit here and agree with doing that, but it sometimes that can happen and we're fine with it. But our motto is you're a contractor, right? Play the role that you are,
exactly.
Right? You keep that role. Don't walk into that house like you're the owner, right?
That's exactly right. And
because then you're piercing the veil, right? Yep. You're piercing the veil.
And I have that exact discussion with our owners that go in and do their own repairs, and I give them that exact instruction. Go there to be somebody that the property manager sent you to do a repair, and that's it. Do not be an owner.
And that's very beneficial to yourself and your time, because that will change the amount of time it takes you to do that repair, because you pierce that veil and now Mr. Owner's coming to replace the flapper on the toilet, then now they know that you're not just going there to replace the flapper on the toilet. You're going there to see everything they think about your property, everything
that they think about your property, every bad thing the property manager has ever done to you. You're gonna hear about from the moment of beginning of time on. It's gonna be ridiculous.
It causes us problems because now they've requested things directly from the owner. They don't think they need to go through the property manager, and now
every time.
And now 6 months later, we're hearing that, well, we requested that this repair was done 6 months ago, and we're like, what are you talking about? Well, when the owner was here, we told him about it, and we never knew.
We don't have it. We don't have it documented. I heard from an owner yesterday, Kyle, that she chose to pierce the veil right off the bat.
It happens.
And I told her when she did it, I said, well, you're going to get phone calls from them. You chose to exchange information, and these are the reasons why you shouldn't have done that. She told me yesterday about repairs that she's done recently we don't even know anything about. And she was telling me about, things that I'm like, well, I don't have any of this documented. I don't know what you want me to do. I mean, like, they're not going to be on your end reports. The repairs aren't going to be, I don't know if you're deducting them on your taxes.
You're messing up some of the things you get an advantage of having a property manager from. And that's a big one that actually eye opens people when I'm like, well, I give you a statement at the end of the year that you can hand over to your accountant. And they're like, crap, now I'm going to have to add in all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's small things, right? But they...
And do people keep their receipts from Home Depot, Kyle?
No.
They don't. Or if they do, I mean, maybe some people do. Maybe, maybe they have it on a credit card statement or something, but it's not easy to go back a year later and remember all the repairs you've done and pull up the receipts for all that. And I mean, it's just easier to have it in a report from your property manager, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and then there's the reason I brought up it's houses they previously live in, right? Because they previously live in it, they had an emotional tie to it. Yeah. So they know every little detail about the house they used to live in. So they start having, they're going to nitpick the entire house in a completely different way than it would be done otherwise, right? And I'll just keep that general.
Well, time heals that a little bit too. So here's the cycle that those owners go through. While they're living in the home and they realize they're going to be renting it, they're still tied to that home as if they're living in it, right? After they move out and they start collecting their rent, that tie slowly starts to dissipate. And it won't dissipate, like I said, slowly, okay? But the reason why I say that is, like, I'll have owners that are still living in the home, like we're about to rent it, and they are definitely out there doing stuff that they would only be doing if they're living in the home, right? They want to make repairs or improvements based on their comfort and what they would want, and forgetting that this is now a rental property and it may not be necessary to do this. Maybe you do want to do it for somebody else's comfort because, you want to be nice, but you don't have to. It's a business.
Well, a lot of times they're going to ask you for upgrades. They're going to use those emotion for upgrades where we're just going to not even, the owner wouldn't even, if you ask us for upgrades, certain upgrades, they're probably not even going to make it to the owner because that they don't need to be doing those things.
That's right.
But the other is the tenant relationship. The tenant having, a lot of times this happens when we have a really good tenant came here because there's two ends. We talk a lot about how tenants, some bad tenants will target single property managers, the ones that list on Zillow and don't have a property manager and all that stuff because they know they won't be vetted. Well, on the other side of that, really good tenants target property managers these days because they know it'll be treated like a business. They know what to expect. They know there's a liability. They know the property manager has to be held accountable to a certain standard, all these things. And then when that veil gets pierced, sometimes it changes the expectation from the tenant in a negative way. So this tenant now that you've asked for this once, the tenant's like, okay, well, the owner wants to come. The property manager's already done their walkthrough and inspection, so now the owner wants to come into my home. That it's their home, it's the owner's house, right? They want to come into their home just to essentially bother them and make sure they're doing what they want to do. And will this continue year over year? Will they consider this when they consider their lease renewal where they wouldn't have considered this? The answer is usually yes. They will.
Unless the property management puts a kibosh on it. So you're talking about intrusion of privacy, and that is a big deal, right? There's a fine line there because you said it. This is somebody's house. They have every right to go inspect it and look at it if that's what they want to do.
Correct.
So we don't tell people they can't. We just tell them that they shouldn't, or at least not do it too often. But they have every right to. It is their house. But what people forget is just because it's their house, somebody else has made it their home. I know you already said that, but I wanted to accentuate that to somebody else, this is a home to them, and they don't want their home, the privacy of their home, intruded on more often than is reasonable and necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We've lost owners or potential business to people that wanted us to do in-person inspections every 3 months. Now, to some people that sounds reasonable, but that's an over-the-top, unreasonable request in my opinion. And so if you think that sounds reasonable, then you're probably not the client for me because
this isn't like it's like there's a precedent, like this tenant has a tenant that's given us a reason to check it every 3 months.
If there's a reason
right?
to, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, like this is prior to any reason. This is prior to us even leasing it. That our goal is to get a great tenant in there and all this stuff, but you want us to, set a precedent that we're going to be checking on your house every 3 months. Well, that alone, unless they give us a reason, can steer off bad tenants, right? I mean, we can. This is an interior walkthrough type.
I wouldn't want to be intruded on that often. I mean, would you if you were renting a place? I mean, especially if you were a good tenant. So let's say this. Let's say
I'll tell you. I'll give you a definitive statement here. I would not renew after the first year.
Well, especially if it happened on an ongoing basis. So here's what seems like would be reasonable in that sense, right? I'm going to put you in this home, and we're going to do an inspection in 3 months. Just to make sure everything's going well. Make sure that you understand all the systems in the home, and that this is a good win-win thing. And then from then on, it'll just be a renewal, right?
Yeah.
So that sounds reasonable, right? So you go in, you do that, and then you do it at renewal only. Does that seem too intrusive to you? Like if you were renting?
No. And I guess mainly what I was talking about is like an owner walkthrough every 3 months.
Yeah,
it's very unreasonable.
We did get away from. We were talking about
property
owner
manager.
access.
Maybe that could be an arguable discussion. But
so to your point, when an owner wants to do it, that is usually what I try to impart on them. Why don't you let us do it for you? Take pictures and videos, and we're going to provide for you a really good picture of the condition of the home and the things that you want to see. We're going to provide that for you.
Well, and then so getting into some other pieces of this, like we have had owner access issues, and this veil not just being pierced, being stripped down and thrown away, reason for us to drop a client before.
Why do you have us? Why do you have us managing it?
Because it started adding liability to us, because as the property manager, we're under a contract. We have a contract with the tenant and a contract with the owner. We have obligations to both. We have legal obligations to both. Now, when things start happening outside of that, especially negative things like the owner's pass information with the tenant, and then things start happening without our knowledge. A lot of things start happening in communication without our knowledge, and then they start having problems, and the owner, we're getting accusations from the tenant and the owners, and we've had one situation where this happened for months, and then the tenant finally realized that that the owner wasn't communicating any of this to us, and we had no knowledge of it, and that initially they thought that was a representative of our company, even though they stated they weren't, right? But see, all these things muddy the waters in oftentimes in negative ways. That
we've gotten Ring camera videos of arguments at the front door.
Yeah, and it's just
Screaming
like,
matches.
it's like, why are you there? Why is this happening at the front door and not through us?
Why?
Right?
Yeah.
And those things become liabilities for us because they have a lease with us oftentimes. We are holding their security deposit, all these things. So when they start expecting remedies for situations we didn't cause or things that the owner caused or whatever, it's very hard to deal with in a way that we can fulfill our dual obligation because
Right.
we do have a dual obligation. So that's why, for all of the business reasons, this veil is important, but there's also legal and liability reasons that this veil remains to be important.
So here's the thing. I'm going to put it like this. I'm going to give you an analogy right here. Okay. If you're an owner, you own a piece of property, you now own a business. If you choosing to rent it, this is a business. Treat it like a business. Look at it like a business. If you owned a restaurant, you would hire a great general manager that knew exactly how to run a restaurant if you didn't, right? And even though you could run a restaurant, it'd probably be a better idea to hire somebody that knew how to run a restaurant and had experience doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone thinks they can run a restaurant, but and you could probably watch enough YouTube videos on how to run a restaurant, but I guarantee you, getting somebody with experience would make you a lot more money. So do that. So go get that person with experience that can manage the property or the restaurant in this analogy and let them go. If you had that restaurant, you wouldn't walk in one day and undermine what that general manager was doing and start making changes and walk in and start telling employees what to do. That would be the worst business owner in the world, like Jerry Jones. That'd be like Jerry Jones.
Well, as a non-Cowboy fan, I can laugh at that.
At least he's technically a general manager.
Well,
also,
and not that doesn't happen. I'm sure people are listening to this thinking, "Oh, that happens all the time." Well, it's not it should funnel. If you want your business to operate properly, you should funnel that through your general manager, right?
Right.
Like when in big corporations, the CEO doesn't call in these huge, the Apple CEO doesn't call the engineers directly. Well, Apple's a terrible example because it used to be Steve Jobs. He
probably did
that. But
they don't call the accountant that's doing the work. They call the accounting manager.
Yeah, they call the manager. Why have managers if you're not going to go through that piece of the process? So, we expanded on that analogy a little bit, but yeah, I mean the pros and cons. We can put this into pros and cons list. It's just not there. We're talking about mostly cons because the pros of this are.
I don't know if we have any pros. Do we?
No, because I mean, there's one of the pieces of the veil is also, we've talked about emotions, right? So what if through this walkthrough, property's all good, tenants paying good, blah blah blah, and there's a big variety of owners out there. What if the owner doesn't like the tenant? After they're just like, I don't like that person. The person in that house I don't like.
We didn't
vibe.
We have absolutely seen
Get
that.
them out because we didn't vibe. Well, now that's a problem for us because we can't get people out, or even none of our decisions can be like, we have to exclude that comment from our memory, right? Like you never said that. I don't care that you don't like them because I can't even consider the fact that you don't like them.
It has to be a legal breach of lease. It doesn't matter what you think of the person.
And we don't make decisions based on whether you like the person or anything like that. If you don't like how they're treating the property or whatever, that's a whole different point. And I'm not going to dive into the reasons that people have stated they don't like the other people, but that's the problem. That's a big range too. There's a variety of people out there in this world, but the emotional judgments and things get made that shouldn't have been involved in the decision. And when we do walkthroughs, none of that stuff matters, right? It's condition checks.
That's right.
Preventative maintenance, all that stuff. Is it being done? Are you paying your rent? Are you following your contract? Is the owner doing those things? Are you following your contract with us?
More importantly, things are emotional for tenants too, right? So when you show up and they do and they have their emotional rants that they go on, we, for the most part, we know how to answer them to diffuse it, and we know how to handle it. It gets handled in a very systematic, pragmatic way, right? Using some common sense and taking all of their emotions, stripping it out. Like, I'm going to ignore all of your emotion. I'm going to take out of what you're doing right now what the real root cause of what your statements are, or what you're asking me, or what your complaint is, or whatever, and address that.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what most people don't know how to do, especially owners won't do that. They will, what did you call me? You call me cheap? You call me blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, and then they get all butthurt, and like, now you got an emotional explosion, and that doesn't ever go well.
Well, and there's the other side of that. There's sometimes owner, and these things happen. Owner meets a tenant and they love them. They're like, oh, I love this tenant. The tenant's great. Blah blah blah. Maybe they exchanged info, and maybe a year down the road when things aren't going well with the tenant, they try to use that against us and reach out to the owner and tell them things that are happening that may not be happening, or the owner makes an emotional decision now. Like, all right, we tell them, all right, this tenant isn't paying rent, isn't taking care of the property, whatever the thing may be, need to start move-out proceedings, possibly eviction proceedings, and they try to tell us, well, give them some grace or don't do that because we really liked them. We don't make decisions based on that. We make decisions based on the facts, the business decisions, right?
Systems and processes.
Yeah.
They work. Proven to work. So keep using them, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's really it. I mean, it's something that there's so many cons to what could happen, and that we've seen happen, that we advise against it. And it's not, and I almost want to clarify, we're not saying all owner access, right? Like, there are times where we would totally agree with it. Like, there could be some big issue, some big repair that we're dealing with and discussing, and owner's like, let's meet out at the property to see it and discuss it. Those things are totally reasonable. We do those all the time. Some things are big, need a game plan. Maybe they have some options, stuff like that. It's not like you can't ever meet the tenant. It's mainly that we're talking about, keeping this veil up. And there's been clients that made the mistake of piercing this veil and appreciated it and saw the value in what we're discussing, and then in future endeavors we're like adamant about making sure that they kept that up too. Yep. They're like, all right, we're going out there, and they're like, don't worry, I won't tell them I'm the homeowner, right? Because I mean, we go to properties with all types of people, contractors, appraisers, all that type of stuff. So it's not like they're questioning it all the time, right? And I'll bring up another point. This is kind of the same, because it's tenant privacy and annoying a tenant to where they don't want to renew, and not worthy of a whole nother podcast. But like, it's happened a lot during the zero interest rates, but people like want to send an appraiser to the property like every couple weeks, right? That has actually scared a tenant off before, where they had to allow access to like 7 different appraisers over like a 3-month period. And I'm like, okay, until
a waste of money.
Yeah, it was a waste of money, but I'm like, make sure you start talking to your loan officers and making sure this thing's actually going to get approved before we have to send an appraiser.
And reuse that appraisal. There's so many reasons why you shouldn't have 7 appraisals, but I know you're absolutely right. We've had people that have done that. And they don't get us involved in what they're doing. They just call us and make demands. Hey, an appraiser's coming out there Tuesday at 9. Can you tell the tenant? Right. Which,
I mean, to be fair, that situation is in both contracts. That is something we can do on a pretty immediate basis. But
that's not unreasonable. To your point, it's unreasonable to do it 7 times in 2 or 3 months, right?
Yeah. So I guess we have an appreciation for the keeping the relationship between the tenant good to where they, you don't want to annoy people out of the property, right? You don't want that to be the only reason that they left when in the situations where they're great paying tenants and keeping the property up and all this stuff. So, because we appreciate it, because we pass along to our owners and say on this podcast a lot that length of good tenancies is valuable. Mm-hmm. So. Yep. Risking that for things that aren't so valuable can cause problems. Yep. So, and we've been very careful about this one. I feel like we've been specific about what we're trying to talk about here.
Yep.
You know, because there's good reasons to do it, but there's great reasons not to for the wrong reasons. So I think I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I don't think we can elaborate on that one anymore.
Have we ever done this on our own rentals?
You mean visited and met the tenants? No. So I'm always the property manager on my own rentals. My tenants don't have any idea that I own them. Mm-hmm. And I think for you,
sometimes they check. They can check tax records and stuff like that. People
they can
really
absolutely,
want to
but we don't. Yeah, but we don't put it out there. We just, hey, we're the property manager, right? And they treat us like property managers, and which is in a more appropriate relationship than treating us like an owner. So,
that's very true.
Because then when they give us some emotional response, we give them a very systematic, pragmatic property manager type of response back, and that's what they expected, and they're not upset by it. Mm-hmm. So,
well, I love it. So if you guys want to access your own rentals, call somebody else. But if you want to call up, I'm just kidding.
Hey, before we close this out, can we need to do this on our podcast a little bit. I want to remind people that we have some investment opportunities that if you call this number that Kyle's about to give you or this email address, we might be able to share with you. We've got at least one in Orange Beach. I've got two here in Arlington that I could discuss with somebody. So if you're looking to get into the investment game,
Cedar Creek,
we do. That's right. I forgot about that one too. If you're looking to do something, Kyle gives out this email and this phone number every time. That's a great reason to call us because we have some turnkey or some really great, how would you say, easy to get into investments, right? That we can share with you.
Yeah, and if you're a client of ours, we also have some a marketplace portal that has other investments that are out there, so you can check it all out. We can tell you how to get into all that. I'm always happy to discuss. So give us a call, 817-818-9039. Shoot us an email at showmethemoney@wearetpm.com, and we are out.
Later, Hayden.